I think he should read my bio on the website, maybe. Might give you a little more insight into your dad's life's work, which was a little bit more than just New York, I think, in the beginning. So the idea is to set, there is a standard, and I'm not sure everybody here is aware of what the standard should be or what it is. But I will say that it's the standard that will be here. So it's not a negotiation, I think. It's an expectation of being able to provide consistent, qualified service. When you eat at your favorite restaurant, you go on a Monday, you get linguine and clams. When you go on a Friday and the same chef's not there on a Monday, you still expect the linguine and clams to taste the same. But if it doesn't, you're upset. You feel you were shorted. That's exactly how clients feel when I was transitioning from being their regular engineer and then all of a sudden having to have another engineer take my stay. And sometimes it wasn't always seamless. And then I realized that I was failing as a leader in the industry by not helping our industry set the standard. So some of you may know that Infocom offers a course that sets the standard of what an audio installer needs to know. Obviously, they need to know more, but there needs to be a starting point or a standard. And they've managed to do that standard. Then they've asked me now to evaluate that standard to possibly make the corrections in there. And then I'm saying to them, I'll do that, but then I want you to help me make a standard and a certification for live event engineers. I think we're worth it now. You know, what is a live event engineer supposed to be doing? Or and if there's no way for us to provide the same recipe for success, let's have a starting point. So, I guess to start, and what is the role of an audio engineer in today's work? And of course, how does it apply to here, but more importantly, to anywhere you go and any theater you work in? Most audio people, we're only as good as our last gig, right? It's not a freelance mentality. You could be full-time with a company or not, but you're not going to the same recording studio every day. You're not going to a controlled environment. You're walking into something different every single day. All of that has to be negotiated the same way or looked at in the same perspective. So now if you're mixing, if you're my A2 at the New York Philharmonic, when you're not my A2 at a New York Philharmonic, I expect to hear positive things about you in your life because you were once part of my world. Now, that might be unreasonable, but anyone who was under my tutelage when I taught Dan when he was in high school and I taught 10 years at Yale, anyone who studied with me, in a way, I challenged them to act accordingly in the best interest of what we do, which is service to people. And you represent. And that's something that's really fallen down, which we'll talk about later. But so you're representing Bell Works and L&M Sound and Light to come here and mix. But you're still an individual. You still have your set of skills. And we want to capitalize, in a sense, on what you know and also support what you don't know in a meaningful way. So I was attracted to work with Jess here from Axelrod, who, by the way, if you ever get a chance to meet this man, I don't know if he's here, I saw him walking around. His life's work is something that you should all take notice to, because his being impresses me so much of how he's managed to take very little and make really quality wine from it, and continues to do it in his older age. He makes being old completely, not just relevant, but next level, you know? And and he's the director. I'm not sure what his role is, honestly, but that's the theater that invited us here. But why did I take notice of this place? Because, you know, audio crossovers was invented here, you know, in this building, this exact building. Audio was invented in this building. The industry that we have came here. My favorite designer, Don Keel, Constant Directivity, all the white papers I read, they're from here. It blows my mind. And then I'm giving a presentation in Germany, and someone from Brussels tells me, "You're from New Jersey? Are you from Bell Labs?" You know, and I'm like, "You know what Bell Labs is?" And they're like, "Audio was invented in Bell Labs." And I'm hearing this around the world. And this is where we are. I interviewed or spoke with someone who worked here in the 60s and the 70s or whatever with the whole organization. They had another building too. They moved around. It was a lot of different, things that went on here. But it was really interesting to hear his perspective of, they had a Corvette club where they had to drive on where that tower is in the beginning, that one side of the road. In order to make the club, you had to drive 100 miles an hour. You had to reach 100 miles an hour with your car. This is all the staff here. And this is the kind of stories I was getting while they going back and designing slopes for crossovers and all these other things. So just a little side note. So I guess the first topic I'm going to push forward now is being prepared for your gig is the single most essential part of you executing any kind of meaningful service. If you're not prepared, then you're going to default to your knowledge base, or worse, you're going to default to your resume. The resume doesn't matter, and we all know that. I don't walk into a room and tell them my resume so they take me seriously. I introduce myself and I work. And then somewhere down the line, they say, are you that Lou? Or are you, yeah, or maybe no. So you see, because it doesn't matter that day. It's being prepared. So how I prepared and what you're expected to do to prepare is, at minimum, at first, is to experience or listen to the music or the show that you're expected to execute. Bert here has a recording studio. He's a fine engineer, I'm sure. I don't know. He handed me his work, and he's asked me patiently to listen to it. And I have rudely ignored it for 3 months. Not rudely, it's consciously, Bert. It's consciously. Because because my workload, my responsibility is understanding where I'm going. And like right here, I go to Braze. They're a software development that develops what goes on Instagram and how for all these major, and I'm tuning there. So I had to spend last night researching where I'm going in order to understand what their perspective is. So again, Bert, I apologize, but and it's a similar thing. So when I was with the Philharmonic and I would have a new artist come, like Esa-Pekka Solomon, and I was doing a piece that and I had to mix it, you can't go in somewhere and be expected to mix music you've never negotiated, because that's why I would say most musical artists don't like audio engineers. They feel like we have too much control over their creative balance. So you have a person who has spent a lifetime on attacking their bow on the violin a specific way, and then you come into the place and say, "Can I hear kick?" While the violinist is still on stage. And then you fit all of it into your vacuum. But you wouldn't do that if you listened to their music before you entered the room, because you'd be too excited to negotiate them. But when you're not excited to negotiate them, then you're like, kick, 1, 2. You're just doing line checks. That's where you start, kind of idea. I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying anything negatively about your approach if you fit into this, because I promise you, I've done all of the things incorrectly in my career. When you do this for 40 years, I promise you, there's not a mistake you've made that I haven't made 5 times. And that's what gives me conviction to talk about, to share my mistakes, to make what you do in a better way. One week, I mixed Martha Stewart, Jeremy Irons, and Barbara Cook. At the time, I thought Martha Stewart was in prison. Jeremy Irons was a sinister actor, and I didn't know who Barbara Cook was. And that was my week. So I needed to figure out about Martha Stewart. What was she trying to accomplish? Am I doing talking head? Well, what talking head is it? What is it for? It was for the Smithsonian, actually, and it was called where they recorded her testimony with Emeril Lagasse as the interviewer for her Smithsonian, what's going to live on. And then Jeremy Irons, I wound up spending a week with him, and he was sick. And I had known that before I walked in because I researched him. And then I researched the piece he was narrating. And then I thought about it. If he's sick and he's got to deliver his voice amongst a 140-piece orchestra where he's sitting in front of, I'm going to be in for a real challenge. I might want to get a handle on what the audio system is going to be that day. So, and then Barbara Cook, I didn't know much about. You know, and I'm embarrassed to say this, who she probably musically is one of the most influential people in my life now, because, and I researched her history, but she was old and I wasn't sure what she was doing there that day. I called to try to get the information. Sure enough, Barbara Cook was Leonard Bernstein's ingenue on Broadway, and she was recording her 80th birthday party. And I got a chance to, and then I hear this person sing, and I hear her phrasing, which was, I had never heard people sing like that in my home. She was 80. She stood up without a stool for a 2-hour rehearsal and was as professional as a 21-year-old who was lusting to get the gig. That's how she performed that day. And you wonder why she's considered one of the greats. So that was a week of mine. So I walk in with Barbara Cook. I walk in with Jeremy Irons. I wound up sitting outside on the curb with him at Lincoln Center, chain smoking. Famous actor. He's been in 100 films. You know him. I don't know. You got to look him up. And then talking to him to settle him down, to be able to put a microphone on him that would work. And that's why you researching what music you're doing. And I will tell you this. It doesn't matter who's performing. I met another influential singer in my life. She was 16, 17 years old. It was an Irish festival. Her name was Aoife Clancy. She was one of the Clancy brothers' daughters. And she walks out on stage with this long red hair, opens her mouth. It was angelic to beyond. I could not believe it. And this was in a school auditorium on a rainy Saturday for a bunch of screaming kids. And you know what? It doesn't matter. And to this day, 35 years later, I'm still listening to her music, you know? And now the other part of this is preparedness, is to study the system you're going in. You as a freelancer, whether you're with L&M or whether you're with any other of the fine companies that we have in the local or non-local area, you're tired of asking them, what will I be mixing on? What is my expectation? And probably I was, at some point, the guy on the other side who may have even not wanted to take the time to explain it to you, or I'm not sure that's ever true, but my point is that for you to set the standard of the professionalism that we require, or people require, the world requires of us, and what you want to be for yourself, right? You have to ask these questions. And if they don't want to answer these questions, then you have to tell them you're not working for them. You know, it's important because you too need to make a change, make them change. So, because all we're doing is caring about what we're about to do. And again, it doesn't matter if it's Aoife Clancy or Barbara Cook. The perspective of what your job is the same. It does not change. So, studying the system components, the history of the venue, because I research where I'm going to mix, because I want to know if there are bad reviews in the place. So if I'm mixing, I remember mixing at a town hall in Manhattan. I researched, and I heard a bad review in town hall. And then I did some more homework. I looked up all the pictures, you know, to see what system. I found out the system list, blah, 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 blah. to get a handle on what am I going to walk into? Is the room already a nightmare? Like, what is their expectation as a house management perspective? I worked before there was internet. And what does that mean? I had to mix on a PM 5000. That's an analog desk years ago, and I didn't have one. And I needed to mix this singer called Lainey Kazan. This was 30 years ago or something, and 40 years ago. And I didn't have the console. It was a touring standard. And I didn't know what to do. My friends never mixed on it. I didn't know how to use it, and I was the engineer. So back then, there were less traveling engineers than there are today. And they expected me to be who I am. And so I called Yamaha. So I dialed 1-800-555-1212. Those of you who don't know that, that's where you can find an 800 number, because their number wasn't listed in my phone book, Yamaha. I couldn't find their number. You can't just go somewhere and find a number if it's not in your phone book, right? This is before the internet, guys. So I find the 800 number to find out where their address was, because they wouldn't pick up the phone, to write them a letter, to ask them for a manual on the console. Now think about that for a second. All the work it took in my preparedness. Now, some people said, Lou, you're an idiot. Why would you care? It's a gig. When I hear anyone say it's a gig, you never see my face change, but I really don't admire or respect you for saying that. I got my job at the Philharmonic because their engineer before said, it's just a violinist. It's one mic. And he was fired that day for saying that to the operations manager. And I was at the Philharmonic for 15 years until I left. And that's how I got the job, believe it or not. It's interesting, right? So it's just a gig. It's never just a gig. Because as freelancers, your last gig is all we have. I never had a job. I was always, and still am, a freelancer. I'm expected to perform. If I agree to go out and do it, then I'm expected to perform like my life depends on it. Because it does. It actually does. Okay. So I finally get a call back that says I have to pay them $4.50. They won't send me a manual. So then I write a check and I mail it. Now this is going on for weeks to try to prepare for this one gig. And then I finally get the manual one day before. And it was, 180 pages. And it was translated from Japanese, and it was poorly translated. And I'll tell you what I learned so much about just reading that manual in a 24-hour period to do that one job. And that resonated with me my whole life. Because I noticed with a lot of you, because I know some of you here, you believe your knowledge base is what's available to you on YouTube or what's available to you in the internet resource material. When I studied in my graduate degree, I learned that we were supposed to justify research before we quantified research. So to see or hear someone talk on YouTube about something doesn't mean it's true or it's the best practice. We were taught how to evaluate those things. I've learned that I'm trying to make fresh mozzarella, and I learned that every video I watched on YouTube was purposefully not telling me how to make fresh mozzarella. They may believe they were telling you how to make fresh mozzarella, but they never actually did. And then it made me question some of the audio things. And then I started to research more about who are the people we should get this information to. So it's your job to figure out all the components of what's there and how to use them, or else don't take the gig. If you don't know how to use an in-ear monitor system and how to program the brain of an Allen and Heath, and that's what they have in this theater, then you shouldn't take the gig. You're not a qualified A1. And when I talk about tools, we'll talk about that later. And you don't negotiate or learn on the client's time either. So The third is, in preparedness, is to produce documents to make everybody's day better. If your client doesn't tell you the information you need, you must ask for it. So if you're an A1 and you're relying on me, I had to rely on union guys who, a lot of my career, who were overweight, they couldn't see, they didn't like to bend down, super strong, and had super big egos. So what does that mean? I had to think about that to be successful at Lincoln Center. They didn't want me there. I'm taking away a union guy's job, right? Even though they're getting paid for it, I'm still being masked. They don't want you there. So, okay. So what do I do to make their job easier? I changed every label on all the equipment to be a font size they can read, so they didn't have to bring out reading glasses, because their ego is bigger than all of it, right? So they don't want to bring out reading glasses. Next, I put big lists inside the cases, and I packaged everything so they wouldn't have to bend down to be successful. Then all of a sudden, they were like, you got to get this guy Lou here. We like this guy. And he's the best. They don't know how good I am or not. But just because I prepared and I gave them lists that were wide typed, I prepared the gear, I had the company, if I was sub-renting, I had them prepare the gear in the correct way. Yes, this takes a lot of time and energy just for a gig, right? So you got to think about that. So you have to think that when you get paid to do a gig, what is the gig you're being asked to do, and how much are you going to be paid for that so you can be what they're expecting of you? If it's not enough, you need to ask for more. And they have a right to tell you no. It's a negotiation of honesty and transparency. But if you know that you do 5 hours of prep work, then maybe you need to, if you're showing that, I am sure they will not have a problem paying you what you deserve. I promise you. Bring the proper tools and look the part. This is a big one. Without tools, you are a laborer, and you should be paid as one. If you walk in and you haven't researched where you're going, and you're wearing a concert t-shirt and smell like pot, and a hat backwards, and you're walking into let's say, a high school auditorium, you don't look the part, man. And unless you're a laborer, you shouldn't be there. And even if you were a laborer, I would say you shouldn't be there, dressed like that. But we've all seen this. We see it everywhere. Because there's a reason for that. I'll talk about that later. But and I guess also, just because you're hired as an A1 doesn't make you an A1. It's an opportunity for you to be an A1. Listen, can I say that again? Because it sounded good as I said it. Just because you're hired as an A1 doesn't mean you're an A1. You should value the opportunity to be an A1. Just happened to me today. Is a story every day about things like this. I got called from Juilliard to design their whatevers. And it's an opportunity. I said to them, thank you for the opportunity. They were shocked. They were like, thank you. Guys, you have it backwards. I have to prove myself that this is going to be valuable for you. It has to be perfect. Or else, why would you call me? This kind of thing. So dress the style you are supporting, not your personal style or your political agenda. This is bigger than you think. This goes hand in hand with what I just said about being A1. You chose to be the A1. They tell you to be the A1, and you go to the console, and like I said, you're not prepared or whatever, you're not dressed properly. Then, again, I want to make that real analogy about being the laborer. But if you're dressed appropriately, and you come in with the right tools, which we'll talk about later, it gives you a leg up, We had a staff member, his name was Maciek Zelik from Poland. Maciek, I spoke to him yesterday. He's on tour. He's doing a lot of acoustics work. He's doing great. He went to Poland, came back. Maciek came as an angry high school student who didn't speak much English. And he came from a place where they would rob his shoes on the way to school, And he worked because he owed a person money. That's how I met him. But he was angry, and anytime anyone asked him for anything, he got mad. For him, it was because they would approach Machik like this: "Hey, yo, monitor guy, hey, give me a little more on my wedge." Machik, that was you're calling me out for a fight. That tone, he didn't understand, because his name was too difficult to remember or produce. I made him a name tag, Machik. Actually, we changed his name, Magic, and then we had a T-shirt that said, "The magic is happening." He became a celebrity. He became an audio celebrity in New York. "Magic, yo, man, how you doing, bro? It's good to see you again. Can I get a little more?" "No problem." A name tag. I wore a name tag all the time because people are embarrassed when they don't know your name, and they don't have the time to learn your name. And it doesn't matter. You're working for them. They're not working for you. You're in the service industry, and that's what the expectation is. Be humble. Prepare your personal objectives. This one I think is kind of deep. If you go to a gig and your thought is to attract attention for networking your next gig, for me and for people who are, I believe, are on a certain basis of skill level and humanness, it's a red flag. We're not going to say it there on the gig. If you were my A2 at the Philharmonic and you started your day 2 minutes late, you weren't dressed properly, and you made an announcement as you walked in, I would say that you were asked to go home in the next 2 minutes, because I would never risk it. And get noticed by your skill set, not by reading your resume. And I have a problem too. My problem is I love to talk about gear. I repeatedly waste time talking about equipment. So when I go on a crew call, I tend to talk about gear, and I love it. And it's not about what I love. It really isn't. I'm working. Sometimes as the owner of L&M Sound and Light, I would show up. Still, I wasn't respecting the crew chief. So my objectives were misplaced. My objectives. So if you're going to go to a gig, and you're looking at your watch for when the first crew break is, and you're not sure, and you're not so anxious to do the work of the day, you might want to reevaluate what you do for a living, right? And if you go there with the idea that you need to have some validation as an individual, we all here can name a lot of people in the freelance scene in New York City, and we know a lot of them by what we're talking about. But it's not right, guys. It needs to stop. You need to be recognized for your ability and your talent. They need to want you there because they need you there, because they know it will not be as good without you there. That's how you build a career like mine. And I've never said that because I don't want to offend anyone. Until someone offended me and said, you have a responsibility to tell people the truth about what you did and how you did it for the last 40 years. Or else they're never going to want what they actually want because no one's taught them how to get to it. You must have your objectives clear before you enter a space. Early. Never go late. Early. You don't need to have to start work early, but you have to be there early. If your objective is because you worked late last night and you walk in and the first thing you say is, guys, I just want to tell you I'm shot. I'm shot. I worked last night till 4 in the morning. You shouldn't have taken the gig the next day. When you have a crew call, your crew call is an estimated 10 hours. It goes 15 hours. You must stay the 15 hours. That's the rule. If this client goes overtime, the client's allowed to go overtime. You can't walk away from the console because you have a morning call. You should never have made that morning call because you knew that your show was coming down at midnight, unless you were in a controlled environment, which you're not, unless you're here and you know that the next day you have the same show again. There's different criteria for this. But understand what I'm saying. Be careful about how you do those things. And then you come in and you want attention for it. Your objectives are not, you're misplaced. You should come in with the anticipation of negotiating whoever it is that's performing because you've done your homework. When I go, I don't like opera. I didn't like opera. I do now. Because I never could understand. The Met didn't have super titles. The music was cool, but it was out of place. I wasn't feeling it until I read the libretto. I had to teach it to a course once, take them to the opera night. And once I read the libretto, studied the libretto even, had the same approach I had as a mix engineer, I'd go to the opera. It was a whole different experience. I didn't need to read the subtitles. I felt it in the language change. It was beautiful. It was amazing. And that's the way it should be when you're walking in. You're going to mix people here that are famous people. They're as famous as anyone is. And you should know everything about them. And it makes them feel amazing. And when you walk in, you're going to gravitate to them because you feel like you know them. And you've already have an admiration or respect for them. And that's really cool. Whatever you need to be your best, you need to bring with you. I know this sounds crazy, but I was on a gig. Richard Tatum, who's a lighting director of One Sound and has been my partner for a gazillion years. Even when he didn't work for One Sound, we worked together. He was with a different company. I went to see Richard on a gig. I remember it was on the west side. It was some outdoor park. And his crew chief, I won't mention his name at the time. Well, you probably don't know him. His crew chief, I don't know, he was kind of hiding outside doing power for like 2 or 3 hours. It just didn't make any sense. Like, where was he? He's the crew chief. He wasn't. And Richard's, thinks that this is fine. This is normal. And then he comes in, and I finally met him, and I said, "Oh, yeah, where you been?" "Oh, I'm running the feeder outside." I said, "Yeah, it's 50 feet. I'm not really sure what took you 3 hours, And then he says, "Well, Richard, then he leaves me. He goes to Richard, and he says, "Richard, I got a sunburn. I have to go get suntan lotion." Now, is Richard still here? Oh, good. Richard was so afraid to lose this guy because he relied on him so much that he knew that it was wrong. So then he left for an hour to go get suntan lotion. But meanwhile, he shouldn't have been outside the whole time anyway, you see? So then I had to have a meeting with Richard to let him go. Once we let him go, I realized that this was 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, he was paid $180,000 that year from our company alone. It's a lot of money to treat Richard that way. I felt like I was a loser as an owner of a company. I did not protect my team. And of course, it seems like I drifted from the story, but I didn't drift from it. If you know you need to eat because you're a diabetic or because you're on the bordering of you get weak if you don't have enough protein or you worked out at the gym heavy, you got to bring that stuff with you, man. You have to be in your physical, mental state the whole entire time you're there. And if they don't give you a break, they're allowed to not give you a break as long as you've negotiated to get paid for it, right? There were many days that we didn't get breaks, 12 hours straight. And the union guys, they loved it because they got time and a half or double time they got a meal penalty, it was called, which basically as freelancers, we're not in a union, which is a good thing, not a bad thing, because it could be a good thing. But it's up to you to talk about these things. Maybe it's not the day of the gig, it's before you take the gig. Maybe show kind of some respect by going to visit the place. When I wanted to ask somebody for something, I would always go to where their shop was. I remember Aaron Teitelbaum Nagina Orchestra in Borough Park, Brooklyn. I wouldn't dare call him on the phone and ask for more money. I went there I sat in his office, and I didn't ask for more money first. I complimented him. I stated the problem, and I had a solution. And he gave me more money. If I called him on the phone and said, I need more money, he would have said no. Then he might have gotten insulted and fired me, actually. And that's what I was afraid of. So whatever you need on a gig to be your best, you got to bring it with you. Even if you don't eat it, bring packaged stuff. You know, we're in an industry that we chose to be in. We love not going to an office 9 to 5. I've made a whole career not going to an office 9 to 5. And I've made a whole career not touring. I feel like it doesn't even matter how much money I made. It mattered more that I loved everything I've done all these years. So, you know, all right, I'm going to push faster. What are the necessary tools for an A1 engineer? Lewis believes that I made these standards. I didn't make these standards. These are the standards of the engineers that are paid to be A1 engineers. This is the expectation of an A1 engineer. Whether you do it or not is not the point. The point is you need to do it here at minimum. And you should do it at every L&M gig if you're the A1. So you need a PC computer, or at least a Mac computer that can do PC. You need a PC computer because you must download the software for the Allen & Heath, for PowerSoft amps, for BSS and Crown, wireless workbench, you know, anything that you think you're going to need that day. You know, and I know James traveled, right, James? You traveled with this. And sometimes James pontificates to the other guys, you know, I got this and you don't. You suck and I'm great. But, no, I'm teasing. But, you know, the point is that it really should be the standard of what you do. And you should also have the front-end software, the control software, the amplifier software, the wireless control software. Recording software is a must. It is an expectation now to record the event, if they want to. If you don't want to, like I was asked to record a Paul McCartney thing, and I can't just respond to record unless the client knows, like, because there are issues there. So you have to ask. But if they didn't pay you, like, you see, the problem is that it doesn't mean you make more money if you did an archival recording of the event. It's an expectation. And it's an expectation for you to do it on your PC. Around the world it is. Whether L&M does it or not, I don't know, actually, but it really is. It's actually something you should have even QLab to execute those things that you've recorded. I think we draw the line into editing. I think I edit the recordings because I don't want to deal with the problems going in or looping out. So me, when I get a break, I quickly do a fade up or fade down. I use QLab. I have QLab. And, but I use this other simpler player. And then also, I do also have RX, which is like, I'm not a studio guy, but if I do have to play some rolls that have bad video audio, I might analyze them and find out what's wrong and then try to emulate it in real time because I generally I'm not close enough to the video guys to edit the audio track that they have. So it's kind of important to figure out what the problems are. You know it sounds bad. I think I was with Ed on this gig, and there was something out of phase at, I don't know. Anyway, so it's hard for me to see you guys. But it's important that you have this equipment to be able to execute. I carry with me everywhere I go analyzation software. I do it because I can't trust anything about what anybody's done because my career is on the line, right? If you want to be the best in the world, you have to behave like you're the best in the world. Whether you are or not, it's not the point. It's that your approach is. So I want to know the answer. Just 2 days ago, Lewis came and babysat me to go to do a system tuning. And I realized quickly they just wanted me to come in and bless it kind of thing. You know, and as soon as I came in, I set up Smart. It was the software I use. You can use anything. There are free. There's a lot of softwares. And I realized that it was kind of out of phase, but not really. And why did I realize that? Nobody realized it there. They thought the system was great. And I realized it because I had the smart curves. See, a lot of, I'm going to say a lot of us, Nathan Lively, Michael Lawrence, touring engineers, guys that do this, we keep the curves of every loudspeaker on our laptops because we want to know what's going on, like in case it sounds weird to us. Then we want to measure it and then compare what is the room doing, what is the front end doing, or maybe something's not connected correctly. I know this sounds deep, but you learn how to do this in 10 minutes. And then now I have like this phonic handheld thing, which helps me really quickly if I can't get to set something up. Because, you know, when you're in a Broadway show too and you have the same show every day, you have to check every light bulb, every position if you're a lighting person. You have to run every cue when you're a lighting person. You have to, with an audio person, I have to check every loudspeaker in the whole entire place. I have to check every feed, dressing room feeds, management feeds, monitor feeds, you know, all before I even begin to start my day. And if they don't give you time here to do that, because they're being cheap in a sense, because that's what it is about, or if they're not valuing what it is that you do, you need to express it. Compliment, thank you for the work, state the problem, give them a solution why they need to do it. I'm so grateful for you to give me this opportunity. But without this time, I'm not going to be able to do my best. I will try to do my best, but I will not be able to execute my best unless I have this amount of time. Is it okay if you add 2 hours to my crew call? How do you argue that? It's hard to argue that for 2 hours. And if the person says no and they don't present an argument, they're not the one making the decision. Hint. If somebody says no without thinking, they're not the one making the decision. Find out who is making the decision. And that you have to talk to that person. Okay? I can tell you a story about the Met after that. Another time. Do not update software on anyone's equipment ever on location or a day of a show. It is not your job. I see it happen all the time. You like a new compressor that Midas offers on an upgrade or the Allen & Heath, and you want to use that compressor, you've made a mistake already. You didn't prepare before you came. You should have asked. Did you do the newest update on Allen & Heath before I get to the gig? Did you do the newest Avantis update? I want to use. On this show, I've researched my artist. I know they want this verb. It happens to be in that console on the update. Can I have that? Can I do it? And then what they would say is, yeah, come to the shop and upload the software. And we'll pay you for that. Or we'll have our shop person do it. We'll send you an email back to confirm that it was done. But unless you do that, it might not be on their schedule. I don't upload new software for minimum 6 months. Sometimes I don't ever. Because if I know I'm not needing anything that they're offering and I'm having success, I'm not going to change it. I'm building software now for One Sound, and we're building it. We have 13 software engineers, and we're building software from the ground up. And I will tell you that last night, Sunday, I realized on one of the updates they did to the software, they actually took a profile of one of the loudspeakers out of the system that was working for a year. That was what the update did. And then, of course, you see the 13 guys, scramble trying to figure out whose fault it was. But that's not the point. The point is that you can't do it. It's too risky. It's too risky. And don't take it upon yourself, And it's no excuse if you do it. It's termination in my book. You touch something that you didn't own. You did something that you weren't asked to do. And this happens every day. You need a playback device to go along with your computer. And your playback device can be, generally you need something to record with too. So I recommend a USB bus playback device. You can buy them as cheap as $60 or pay $200 for the best one. And I use a bus-powered one because I don't want to plug it in the outlet because they may not have it in the power strip, and I have to go quick. And yeah, I'm taking a subway that day. So I can't carry that. Yes, you can. I carry it everywhere I go because it's the expectation. And when I was mixing the Philharmonic and I was part of a company, I had them carry my work box. That's a whole nother thing. This is you as an engineer. You're not expected to carry paddles or speak-ons or these kinds of things. You can, but you're not expected. But you are expected to carry a mic pre for a recording and to meaningfully play back audio from your computer, whether it's background music or whatever. I was telling the guys that I see on a local basis about a sound wire. I'm going to send you all of my notes, by the way. I'm going to send each of you my notes, and I'm going to send you links to some of the things that I'm talking about or my suggestions. Sound wire is a cable that is a USB-C or A going to a dual XLR, that the XLRs are built into the preamp. The preamp is built into the XLR and has the best sounding audio out of any preamp that I've heard or tested so far. And it rejects phantom power coming in. Great, quick, I need to play something. I don't have to take out my mic pre because I just have to play something. I'm not going to rely on the 1/8 inch out because that's not really audio, right? We know that. That's the hard drive noise. There's a lot of problems with that. And I think companies do it all the time, but they shouldn't. And I would never mix a show with it. So if the company doesn't have it, I'm grateful the company hired me, right? So when I was in Bali, I can't go there and complain about everything that they did wrong. I was hired to do my job. My job was to humbly expect what I asked for and then also not to fault them for what I didn't ask for. And so it's the same story in what we're talking about. So at any rate, the sound wire is something that might be great for you guys to use. I don't know if I got off topic. Analyzer mic in a wireless system. Again, I think an analyzer is subjective, but I would say that in my world, I don't know one engineer that doesn't carry this in my world. And I have to tell you all, and I'm sorry, because there's some of you I see every day, and I love you. You're my family. And I don't tell you this. And I've done you a disservice by not telling you. You need this. You have to have it to be an A1. If you don't come with the tools, like I said, you're a laborer. There's nothing wrong with a laborer. Lorenzo was my right hand for 20 years. You guys all, who have been with me my life know that. He was a laborer, and he was one of the best people I've known in my whole life. And but you get paid for a purpose, more money to do a certain job. I use a wireless because it's not always easy to get cable where you need it in a theater. I use a handheld because if I'm on a third tier and I need to take a measurement, I was in the Count Basie Theater, and they have a beautiful $1 million system or whatever. And I'm mixing Idina Menzel, a singer, sings Frozen reverb. And she, and I'm like, I go listen, and I went, wow, the last 16 rows have 0 audio. The system's been installed. I did my homework. System was installed 1.5 years ago, right? And then I asked them, I said, does this come in and out every day? No, nobody's allowed to move it. I said, okay. And then, sure enough, they've been just doing bad audio for 16 years. And it's a D&B system, which not the system's fault, right? It's the systems engineer's fault. And why did it take me to go in there to figure that out? That meant that guest engineers haven't done their job prior, and really that's what it's about. Now, sometimes people get pissed off at you for this, right? Because it depends on your approach of getting them to fix it or not. So I had to be very delicate because I needed the 16 rows. First question was, did they sell out the balcony? And they said yes. And I said, would it be okay if we changed the trim height? And they were grateful because I showed them what because I had a handheld analyzer, an analog one at the time. And then I showed it to them, and they moved the cluster. They moved the array, and it was a good show. And so even though I walked into a place that has a system, you can't take anything for granted. A voltmeter or an amp probe, they can be one and the same. A voltmeter, not a cube to test electricity. You can have a cube too, because they're easy, but they don't test the integrity of a ground and a neutral properly. So I've had a discussion for the last 4 days about floating grounds, chassis grounds, and today's electronic equipment with very deep conversation. They're teaching the wrong thing at this CTS school at Infocom, and we're talking more and more about this. And some of the older guys and I we're kind of talking about it. So at any rate, you need a voltmeter to test these things. You also, and this carries in my four-wheeler that's this big, and a wireless router. You have to bring a wireless router. There's a $31 one that's this big on Amazon with at least one cable to get you in the already existing network to get control of the amplifiers of the wireless. I don't go home without it. And headphones. I bring a mic clamp. It sounds silly. I bring an external clamp that I can clamp a mic anywhere. I could clamp it here. If I can't, I have to travel on planes. Like you're taking subways, you're taking buses. It's not easy to carry this stuff. So mic stands, I also can give you, I have a good mic stand that weighs 2.2 pounds. That goes up to 7 feet. I can tell you all these tips and tricks over the years of me hauling stuff. I use a Sound Tools Speak-On connector, tester, that's a send and receive, rather than trying to test continuity of a line that's already in place. Because there's no way for you to really know. Sometimes it's easier to switch an XLR out, but it's not easy to switch a speaker cable out, right? So Lincoln Center had gotten a new D&B system in when I was mixing there, and I did my process, and I discovered that there were 2 speakers that were out of phase up in the cluster. And the union guys took me for a grain of salt. They said, okay, Lou, great. They said, because they don't care, I guess. I reported it to everyone. It wasn't enough for them to hire D&B back or something to test it. So they hired Bob McCarthy, who is probably one of the best at this in the world. He works for Meyer now. He wrote the great book, by the way, Bob McCarthy. It's heavy to read, but it's a great book. So Bob came in and did an assessment and tuned the PA. They said, listen, Lou, we got Bob in. Sometimes when you're in the backyard, they take you less seriously. Like when I go to Europe, I'm taken very seriously. But sometimes in your own backyard, since they see you every day, they felt they're going to get Bob McCarthy from Meyer in. And he, by the way, he was better than me. He was amazing. So, but what did he say? Those 2 speakers were out of phase, right? And I didn't gloat like you guys are assholes, you know, I'm better. That wasn't the point. I was like, I'm glad we got to the end of that. You know, I'm glad we realized what the problem was. We all want a better show, you know. And but again, if I didn't test the system in a meaningful way, now you can do all of this in a half an hour, by the way, or an hour. I would not leave less than an hour to do these kinds of things. And you should do it. You could do it in a theater like this, but you can also skip in a theater like this because there's very minimal parts to this sound system. So you can listen to it and know. Most of you, I know your ears. You're qualified for sure. And Lewis said that, and he was right to say your skill set is high. But I can't quantify everybody's ability to use their skill set in a meaningful way for a client every day. So the Phonic makes or NTI is a handheld analyzer, which you don't have to bring any of that other stuff. You could just use a handheld analyzer. There's something in analyzation called a transfer function. If you want to talk about that at another time, I'll do another workshop where we get hands-on with that. Or you can go, I'll send you somewhere if somebody can do it. I perform as if I am the best in the world, wherever I go. I have to take for granted, I've done this since I was 20, that they hired me because they think I'm capable of doing it. But I cannot deny that even after all of these years, I am not anywhere close to being the best in the world. I often, as I get older, realize how many things I don't know. And it's really interesting. about that. As you get older, you start thinking more about what you don't know than what you do know, because you're more confident about what you do know. And so I guess, what was my end point here? Not understanding my own. Well, I never will be the best in the world, because nobody is. Especially if you're a bass player and you go on YouTube and see an 8-year-old kid just like, I graduated like a master's degree in conducting an undergrad in bass. And I remember being like, I thought I was a good bass player, and YouTube was coming out and this stuff was happening. And I see an 8-year-old like, okay, I want to quit, like this kind of thing. But that's not the point. I was the best in the world for them because nobody else was there but me, right? So why not act like you're the best in the world? And going back to that town hall gig to say one thing. So town hall gig, I had to bring in a PA. I realized most of the complaints in the theater were the balcony. So I redid prediction for this place using the PA I was using. How to get that balcony. I worked really hard. I work really hard on every show, honestly. I do not give up. I'm just more efficient at it these days. I'm more efficient at it. But I don't give any less attention because nobody cares. It's about the show day. That's what we love about this business. That day is the most important day in the world. We love that excitement. So I do a prediction, and I go, and it's a group from Israel, and it's a folk artist who I researched. I listened to all his music, funky-looking guy, but it was awesome, and was telling a story from a collective in Hebron, like where there are bombs and people are dying, and this guy writes these songs. And I'm listening to this music. I'm like, this guy is super cool. Now, if I didn't do that, I would go in there and think like, this guy he looks dirty, Like I would evaluate him on the terms of being a local New Yorker. That, guys, the world out there is big. Trust me on this. I've learned that last year. So then we do a sound check. The guy says one thing to me only, and he goes, Lou, an Israeli accent, goes, Lou, I love your smile. It makes me happy. That's all he said to me. And great. And we do the sound check. I set the amp levels, this whole thing. No monitor engineer. I go back to mixed position. I have a whole crew, the union guys. Bill Daling, those guys used to get very drunk in the union back then. And they were passed out when the show starts. So now he comes on, and his amplifier is screaming loud. Like absolutely screaming. Ruined the whole sound check. And I've done all this work. I get off mixed position. I run backstage. 2 stagehands block me. You're not allowed to go on stage. This is my show. I've worked 4 days on this. The guy told me I had a nice smile. I don't care. I'm going to go change that amplifier. I'm not sure if you were on that gig or not. You don't remember this. And then I push my way through. And then, sure enough, I lower the amplifier, and I go back to mixed position, which was, of course, it's out of the norm, right? You see this big guy dressed in black running on stage. That's another reason to dress appropriately. And then at the intermission of the show, they said he wanted to see me, and you're in trouble, dude. You'll never be in this theater again. That's what the guy told me. I was told that at Carnegie Hall, you'll never be invited back to this theater again because I protected my investment, which was my client and the artist. And of course I was back at Carnegie Hall because you serviced. You did what you were supposed to do. The guy comes up and he hugs me, sweaty, smelly and all, and says, you saved me. I made a huge mistake. And the fact that you came up and did that for me made my night. I said, sir, it made my night because I wouldn't have been able to have a good result. And again, it all starts with all the things that I've mentioned. If you didn't invest all of that, you may have just said, I don't feel like getting up. The guy's not picking up. He's wrong. I'm not wrong. Is it really about that? It's about you doing your best. The same thing happened to me at Lincoln Center, my first gig. The union didn't want me there. Alec Baldwin comes out. The Philharmonic Gala, first gig at the Philharmonic, comes out, mic off. turned off. I said to my A2, who is the head of the union, Richie, who became my friend 3 years later, and I said, Richie, tell him the microphones are. He says, you know, my father had this job before I had the job. And I'm in panic. Alec Baldwin is waiting for his mic to get fixed. And I'm asking him to call on the headset to go backstage to make sure the receivers are plugged in. And he says to me, my father had this job before me. And my family, we've been here, and this is my job that you have, basically. So I got up and I ran, and I went backstage, and then there's Mike, these were they all became my friends, and he's blocking the door to the wireless rack. And this is my first gig. He doesn't know me. He's a big guy, and I have to knock him down. He unplugged my rack. They didn't want me there. They didn't care about the client, the Philharmonic. I plugged my rack back in. Then the show is over. The person who hired me tells me, screams at me on stage, how dare I ruin the show by a lack of preparedness. Now, I was hired still, right? So I said to him, sir, I was as prepared as I could be, and I did my best, and thank you for the opportunity, and I'm so sorry that this happened, and I left. I wanted to punch the guy in the face, and I would have gotten arrested, and I thought that if I ever wanted to do something like that, that would have been the moment. Go down in a blaze of glory kind of thing, you know? And a week and a half goes by, I get a phone call from Alex Johnston, the operations manager, who then told me, Lou, love the way you handled that problem. Are you willing to handle those problems on a daily basis? I said, I don't know if I have the answer to that. And he goes, well, we'd like to have you come in a more permanent position to work on it. I totally didn't understand. But again, you know, it's your approach to the meaningful problem. The other thing is you cannot, if you can't complement, state the problem, provide a solution for anybody that's in this space or any space, you should be quiet. You shouldn't be negative. All of us get to a gig and we don't like the wireless they're using. They put an MKE2 Gold on me. This is a great Omni mic. I could say, I'm near the speakers, why am I not have a cardioid? You know, I could say that. But what's the point? The point is you have to work with the tools that you have. Or find out what's there, ask them to get the tools that you need to do what you need to do. Or better yet, bring the tools. Whatever it takes. It's your responsibility to do this. If you've accepted the job as an A1, not a laborer. It's not a laborer's job. That's why they get paid less money. It's not their job to interpret, to explain. It's their job to work. And let me tell you, there's a lot of times in my life I wish I was a laborer because it's a nice way to work. There's nothing wrong with it by any means. We require it. The A1 has to act as a leader, not a victim. I spoke to a beautiful young guy, Ryan Chambers, works with L&M. I love this guy. I've known him since he was little. I said to him the other day, I said, Ryan, you know, I had a report based on you working on this gig, and it seems like you were very verbal about pointing out all the problems that were there. I said, you know, Ryan, you always act as the victim. You want to be the victim. Everything is happening to you. You can diagnose people in this world in two categories, in a sense. One is a leader and one is a victim. Who do you want to be? If you're a victim, you cannot be an A1. You should change your career. Because you can't be an A1 if you're a victim. Our job is too complex. And that's another thing. Our job is difficult, man. I worked at the Philharmonic was easy compared to doing what you guys do on a daily basis. That's work. It's like a club date musician having to learn 500 songs and play them in every key. Not a guy who reads a score at a Broadway show, right? I mean, this is what we're dealt with. Power that changes, unions, people. We're in situations we've never been in before. It's a lot of effort. And you know what? We should be paid appropriately but behave appropriately. Little things like keep your mix position clean. I was mixing a show for someone, and I noticed tools sitting on the console, lighting guy's tools. And it was a cup of coffee, a Leatherman, and there were 60 guys on the crew call. I threw it all out. Guy comes back and says, what are you doing, dude? That's my stuff. I said, this is my stuff. What do you care? I don't even know you. I said, it doesn't matter. You don't put it on a $2,000 wireless mic, and you don't put your tools on top of an audio console. It's in the garbage. Go get it. And don't ever come back near me again. This is my space. I'm in charge of this today. Take control of it without being nasty, of course. I wasn't nasty, I promise you. Organize all your lists as they change. If you came in with an input list, you came in with everything, keep giving it out, make adjustments. We were on the George Clooney gig. At the end of the day, I was with some of the guys here. I had 17 input lists by the time the end of the gig, and I thought I did preparation. If you're working a Jewish gig, an Orthodox gig, you should know that, for example, don't bring in coffee with milk. It's cultural. Do your homework. If you're mixing a ceremony at the Waldorf Astoria, the new one that's coming out, and it's an Orthodox gig, bring a yarmulke. Don't take the gig if you don't want to adapt to the culture. If you don't like the artist and you have a personal opinion about the artist. I did the Irish Republican Army guy. What's the guy's name who killed all those people? You don't know his name. Anyway, and my friend who owned the Irish sound company wouldn't do the gig for political reasons. I said, I'll do the gig. I don't have a political opinion. And if I did, I'm not going to let it bother me. And that was mature of him to say that. He couldn't be his best. And I think that's important, you know. Always remember to take a break before your show. If they don't give you one, you should really talk about that in advance with people. Because as a sound engineer, if your ear isn't cleared out, I know this happens with me, I struggle. I've also learned as a sound engineer that as the night goes on, I feel like my ears are failing me. As a speaker designer and manufacturer now, I've learned that it's not necessarily my ears. It was actually the equipment I was using. The equipment breaks down with heat over time. And there's a difference. So I started to measure these things to realize things need to be made in a better way. Remember to always save your show file. And I know lighting guys, they're funny. They load a show file in from another show and then they take it with them because they don't want people to have their moving height moves. You know, when you're hired by anyone to do a show, whatever you perform on that show is the property of the people that hired you, just so you know. Your artistry, that's what you sold, is your artistry. Now, I went just last month to Canada, to Bali. And Bali, I was recorded. From the minute I got there, 4 hours in, video cameras, lights, as I'm tuning a system, I finally said, I can't take this anymore. Like, they're shining lights in my face. They were trying to memorize my intellectual property. And it's okay. I mean, my approach, what I'm doing, is theirs. That's why they hired me. My tuning is theirs. It should live there when you're done. That's what we give up. It's just what we do. And my answer, I was in an interview once. Lou, you've always been, everything that you've created in the years, I've followed your life. Again, this wasn't in the US. This was somewhere else. And I followed every part of your life. I know you made this bar in 1988 that Polar Focus copied. I know you made this. I know you made that. How does it feel to be cheated and copied? I said, grateful. How is that? I said, because I had the opportunity to learn how to do that. And that should, but being stolen from someone else is another issue. But if I'm creating something for a client, don't be so weird about deleting your show file. First of all, in audio, it isn't really necessarily genius what you're doing. And you're not groundbreaking anything. So don't be, it sends a bad message to whoever's hiring you. But lighting guys seem to get away with it. They always delete their console. Yeah, am I right, David? Yeah. I guess there's another perspective there that I'm unaware of. So maybe we can talk about that another time. What happens when an artist misses a sound check? You're doing a show here. In May, there's a 2-week show. There's a lot of shows here, by the way. And the artist comes in, and Dizzy Gillespie, I did sound for Dizzy Gillespie as a trumpet player. He missed his sound check. intermission, he didn't like his voice, and he threw his trumpet at me. But he missed his sound check. I didn't miss the sound check. He did. Look at Mariah Carey, missed the sound check. They were so pissed off at her, they left that whole New Year's Eve thing online to go out to broadcast. They did that to hurt her. They could have taken that down. They did it on purpose because she was arrogant. She wasn't kind. And that was the reason. You know, Liza Minnelli told me to tell Marvin Hamlish to go F himself because he was 15 minutes late on running the sound check. I said, Liza, Marvin says he's going to be 15 minutes late. Would you be patient? She says, you tell Marvin to go F himself and I'm leaving. I said, Miss Minnelli, please. I said, I'm the audio engineer. I need a sound check. She goes, well, it doesn't matter, darling. I'm not going to be there tonight. And she left. And no one followed her. Show goes on, 15 acts, like all famous. I'm exhausted, emotionally, physically, orally. I'm exhausted. The beacon goes on. Liza's coming out on mic 2. Now, I had prepared for her. I listened to her last 3 performances. I knew she couldn't hit the note in New York, New York. I was prepared to sample the note when she hit it and let it trail to try to get that note to sound. That took a long time for me to do that in advance. First, I had to watch the videos. This is if you want to be really the best in the world. And I'm not the only person who does this. I never bragged about it. I never talked about it because it's what I did. It was my process. But then I found out guys better than me, it's the same process of. And that's why I'm telling you. So then she goes to hit that note. I have a quick sample. It goes for 2 seconds. It wasn't like the original album, but it certainly drifted on. Next day, the review says very clear, Liza was in the best voice she has been in for 15 years in the New York Times. When she hit that note, it sounded like it lasted for days. And you know, and I was, of course, no one knew I did that. And it didn't matter. I knew I did that. And it was great. And I did my work. After the show, what do you do here after you've done your preparedness, you've tested the system? You're not trusting Lou tuned this system, it's right. I'm sitting there today while they're playing music. I told them I need a touch-up. I missed something. I also think they need more loudspeakers here, which I'm going to propose. But so, you know, you've done everything you had a great show. Nobody compliments you. It doesn't matter because they usually don't, right? We know that. We have a bit of a thankless job. They only say something when something's wrong. They don't say when something is great unless they're aware of audio. Any recorded content that you made needs to be checked, verified, and then handed off before you leave. All mics need to be inventoried and put away as they came, RF as well. You have to store the show in the console and mention any changes you made to that show file for your client. So they're aware that if someone wants to listen to that show file, they should and should be able to. Now is the time you express your opinions on what you were given and to deal with. Never when you're at the show, because you can't solve the problems that way. Now is the time to express it privately with the audio personnel only. Don't go ahead to their boss. Don't network your next gig, and keep that 3-step process in place. And then go back, throw out all your garbage, and pack up front of house. Now, if you've booked an 8 o'clock call, this happened with somebody that's here today, and as soon as the show ended, they went home. That was an arrangement they made with the people at L&M to go home because they had an early morning crew call. I'm hoping that they made that arrangement because they knew they couldn't get anybody else, or they really wanted that person. So at least that was communicated, and they made that arrangement. But me, being the front of house engineer, I thought that didn't seem appropriate. It wasn't my place to say anything. When I got home, and I'm talking to my son, who happened to make that arrangement, I said to him, you know, it wasn't really something that I thought was appropriate. And he told me, no, it's all good. It was an arrangement we made. I said, great. Okay, good, as long as you're good. But you see, it still gives a message, right? To everyone that's on the crew call, you just walked out. And, you know, and that shouldn't happen. And again, you know, well, let me keep going because I'm almost done. I'm supposed to be done by 12:30. You should say goodbye when you leave. I know it sounds simple, but if the people are still there, you should do it. Again, don't be the center of attention. Use a filter and be a team player. Nobody likes a Debbie Downer, and you're not the victim, remember? Respect who pays you first. Secondly, respect the venue. It's their home, it's not yours. Even if you're there a lot, be honest and transparent. If you think people don't realize what you're doing, I promise you they do. And it was the best advice my father ever gave me. He said, Lou, you'll never be the best, you'll never be the cheapest, and you'll never be the smartest. So don't even try. Just work hard, transparently with the people you're servicing as their interest at heart. And I followed that advice. And you know, even when Dizzy threw his trumpet at me and I called my father, and my father's first reaction was, what did you do? Instead of like, oh, I feel sorry for you. You know, it was kind of funny. But I could tell another story about Matrick and Plowman stealing fire extinguishers, but that's another story. On a personal note, I perform as if the best I'm in the world. I said that. Okay, I'm done. Yeah. After the show, that's it for me. Okay, so I hope that helped. Let's talk quickly about the system that's here, and then Rudy takes on after a break to go through the particulars of the system. The system is basically a left-right that covers the whole room, which means that you can mix in full stereo if you want. There is a problem here, and it's going to be difficult. And the problem is that you got some seats here that are going to hear too much bass, and it's not the kind of theater for a front fill. So they're going to put things in this theater that don't belong in this theater. That's just the nature of economics, right? So we might have to pose an argument for that there possibly should be another contour, which is a model of the speaker here, on that sub. And another one, say, on that sub. And then if that sub is brought out, there's some wing fill here, because there was supposed to be front fills here. And they cut them. So that's something that I think is important. This PA has a lot of SPL, you know. It doesn't mean you need to use it, right? So I walked in Rudy's mixing, and there was a person doing a speech here. It was a motivator, and he was playing it, in my opinion, way too loud. And I said, what's the reason you're playing it so loud? And he goes, well, that's what they want me to do. I said, who wants you to do that, and why? What's the objective, you know? And basically, when you play something so loud that's not natural, a person talking this way is natural, right? So if the place is packed, people are noisy, you make it louder. But the louder you make something usually means the less intelligibility, and then you're minusing the time that they're going to be able to pay attention. So think about that when you think of what your goals are in the overall mix. So the contours are in stereo, and there's two up there, the rear fill, the front area. There's a double 15 sub that happens to be like a 6400 watt sub. Don't think of it like a double 15. Think of it like a double 18 that has better bass, because it's clearer in the upper bass. Because it's clearer in the upper bass is why it's a little obvious in these corners, which is why we need to possibly put something else there. As an A1, you might have to sound design here, which is another topic. So you come in, you know you're doing 10 lav mics. You may need front fills, because you know these speakers happen to be 50 by 100. They're the only speaker in the world that does this. They're 50 by 100 down to 190 cycles. Then it's scale, so it's linear to the crossover point. What that means is that 400 cycles, the reverb in a room, the feedback, the nonsense, that doesn't exist around that cabinet. It sounds cardioid. That's why it's forgiving. If they put up this Omni mic, he wouldn't feed back. He would get minimum 6 dB a gain, probably more, and over that sound system. And it's not cardioid. It's just a property. That being said, that's why you're going to enjoy mixing here, because it's a great place to mix. And you have fun, you know, getting your reverbs together. You can have a lot of fun even experimenting with the willingness of the artists during rehearsals. You can have a position it's a new place. You can say what it is that you'd like to see here. and what it is that will make it better. And of course, you know, there's a lot of people here that, like Bert, that work very hard on making this all happen. And I know L&M and One Sound was very honored to be here. And on that note, send me an email to lou@lmsound.com or lou@one-sound.com if you want any. I'm going to send everybody this, but if you want any information about getting any of these, like if you want smart training or any of, I could give you Jamie Anderson's number or any of the people. Any questions? Sorry I killed you for an hour and a half, but tough. Not really. What? Great. All right, thanks guys.